Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kat Smith. I am the program manager for the Meet Your Army program. Just to kind of start off, so this past year, they brought me on in December of 2016, so I have been here just under a year. I think before I came on board, I think we had about 2 or 3 other people who had rotated through the Meet Your Army program. So this year, when I came on board, one of the first things I wanted to do was just kind of take a pause, not completely stop production of Meet Your Army events, but take a pause and really reassess how we were doing what we were doing. It had been a couple of years by that point, and see if it was the best way to do it. So how many of you have worked with the Meet Your Army program, or at least know what it is?
Well, kind of.
Kind of? Well,
we got a phone call, so.
You're going to learn a lot more today.
Okay.
It'll be good. Great. So you've probably seen that things have started to shift, started to change. There's been a lot more gray areas that we're kind of working through as we evolve the program. So just bear with us, and we'll go through how we're looking to attack the Meet Your Army program in 2018, hoping to just make it much more coordinated. OCPA has really taken a lot of the responsibility back for the actual planning of the Meet Your Army events. And that's really, a lot of that is for program integrity. You know, we really want to make sure that we are taking care of our brand. So with that, next slide. So the communication issue has not changed. Next slide. So we're finding that the majority of the Army is in 5 states. That's where you're going to find your major domestic Army bases. The majority of recruits are coming from legacy families, families that have previous either Army, Navy, Marine, Air Force service members, and they have decided to continue that legacy and join a service. But what we're not getting is everyone else. They're not excited and inspired to join. While they value veterans, while they value their military and are incredibly appreciative of their military, you're not getting those people who think, I want to be a part of that. And you see that for several reasons. You can go to the next slide. You see it for several reasons, especially in the media with the story about the Army that is being told. And one of the big things that we want to do is we want to go out to the priority cities that we have determined, which I will go through how we do that. And we want to tell the Army story so that they know the real Army and they know the real soldier. We're not just wounded veterans. We are not just infantry. We are doctors, we are engineers. We have job opportunities and give job skills for when you get out into the civilian world. We are a place for women. And these are perceptions that people have about the Army, and so we are trying to go out and, and let them know who the Army is and reconnect them to their military. So what we want to do is we want to influence recruitment. We are not recruiting. We are not going to go out and tell anybody that they should join the Army. But what we do want to do is we want to tell the soldier story that will hopefully inspire them to think of the Army or the military in general as a career option. We want to help with resources and trust and confidence. And through trust and confidence really is where you're going to influence the recruits and the resources, because the more people feel connected to their military, the more you're going to start seeing benefits in recruitment and resources. Next slide. So how do we effectively tell the story to the American population? So this is our process, and it's a continual circle. So right now, we're in the research phase where we're looking at 2018. We're starting to look at our cities, when we're going to go, things like that. Next slide. Next slide. All right, so our audiences. These are all of the Army's audiences. We are really good at talking to the National Capital Region, for obvious reasons, and to ourselves. We love to talk to ourselves. Next slide. No, not so much. But where we tend to fall a little short is the American adults, the key influencers, and the youth. Youth, obviously, mostly recruiting is reaching out to them. But then you start to feel a little bit of resistance, and the same with American adults with recruiters, because now it's the whole, you're trying to take my kids sort of thing. The Meet Your Army program doesn't suffer from that because we are not recruiting. And that is the first thing that we say if we try to go into a high school or something like that. We are not recruiting. We are here to be leaders. We are here to be role models. We are here to talk about STEM education and the benefits of STEM education, not just from a military perspective, but just from a national perspective in general. Next slide. So one of the first things we do is we go through and we look at population densities. Where do most people live? Now, as we go through and we analyze what cities to go to, our research team not only does population densities, we look at veteran densities, we look at media markets, we look at where the Army story is being told, which again, in those 5 states where we have the bigger Army installations, you're going to see a lot more Army messaging because they're doing a lot more community relations. And we look at our sister services. Where do our sister services have a stronghold? We probably don't need to go to San Diego. Navy's really got that covered. Next slide.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Research. Who does the research? Who is the research team? Where does that come from?
We do.
We as in?
So the Meet Your Army team and OCPA in general. So the assessments team over in MRD does a lot of this research for us as we come up with our priority cities.
Because I would argue that they're pretty thin, and there's other organizations that are much more robust on the research.
I would agree with you on that. And I think one thing that we're working on a lot is like working with AMRG, their assessment teams, and we're trying to build those relationships right now, not only for the assessment of the cities, but for the measures of effectiveness on the back end, because there's a lot of software that we don't have, there's people that we don't have, but we're all trying to accomplish the same mission, and so we're really trying to create that community where we can accomplish the same mission together. So yes, we look where we're not reaching. So where is that Army message not being told? Next slide. And these are the regions that we come up with. Now the regions from 2015 to 2018 haven't changed that much. And so within these regions, we identify priority cities. We also go through USAREC and look at where are we not meeting recruiting goals? Where do we need to talk to people more to build that trust and confidence? And we take that into account when building our priority cities. Next slide. All right, so these are the priority cities for 2018. There are 14 cities on here, which is a lot less than the 27 cities that you have seen before. The reason it is a lot less is because this is a manageable number for the Meet Your Army team to complete in 1 year. So we will go to every one of these cities in 2018, and we will plan a Meet Your Army event with a general officer.
Which
Yeah.
level of general officer? Just at the headquarters level?
No, anyone. Any domestic general officer, for the reasons they're probably not going to fly from overseas. 1 and 2 stars is really where we probably get the most bang for our buck. Sometimes we get 3 stars, 4 stars. You usually have a lot of other stuff to do. Next slide. Okay, so the planning portion of it. Next slide. All right, so now that we have our 14 cities that we're going to be going to for the next year, now that they've been decided, we need to start doing our deep dives into the cities so that we can start planning. And mind you, this is all done at OCPA. This is what our team is working on. Next slide. So we've identified the city. Next slide. And now we have to build the city snapshots. And this is what we're doing right now for 2018. Next slide. So the city snapshots are going to have just a little bit about the city, annual events that are going on, the local government, the local economy. These are things that, you know, anyone who's going to go to the city and talk to people, these are tidbits that they're going to want to know about. Behind this, we have another 3 slides that go through our audiences. So that young adult, the Americans, and then the key business and community leaders, we've divided that up into 7 target areas. So we have diversity, where you're going to have your Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, you're going to have your 100 Black Men of America, you're going to have your NAACP. We have your civic organizations, which diversity and civic will a lot of times overlap, but you'll have your Rotary clubs, your Lions clubs, your chambers of commerce. We've got government, so your mayor, your city councils, community, so your YMCAs, your Boys and Girls Clubs, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, so you'll be meeting with the upper tier executives of those organizations. You have your general public, so you're going to have your sports teams, any organizations, you know, even aquariums or museums or things like that that tend to make a big impact within the community. Those will be more general public. what am I missing? We have corporate. Huh? Yep, academia. So deans, chancellors, presidents, superintendents of high schools, as well as speaking to some of the classes. So that is all broken down back behind this. We put in all the information, we put in the contact information. So the idea is you just pick up this document when you're ready to plan and you start making phone calls. And that is how we start building the itineraries. Next slide. Yes.
Do you work with supporting public affairs offices within that?
Yes. Yes, we do. Absolutely. And I will discuss that as well. Okay, so local events. We look at parades, STEM events, media events. This is something that we've already done. We've already called local CASAs. We've already called reserve ambassadors. And we've already done some research into what is happening in those cities next year that we already know about. And based on that, we have already come up with a schedule for next year. So we know when, if not specific to the date, at least within a month or two, when we're going to be in that city. And we're already starting to spread this around. And I will show you a copy of our schedule at the end of the presentation. But this just helps us coordinate with those local Army assets on the ground. Everybody knows where we're going. They all know when we're going to be there. And now we can all start working together to see how we can get the biggest bang for our buck on the ground and work together. Because what we want to do is we want to help build those relationships on the ground. We cannot maintain the relationships of every city that we go into. So we really want to talk to those people on the ground, USAREC, National Guard, reserves, and say, who is it that you really need to build a relationship with that you might be having trouble with, that we can bring in a general and help you out with that. Next. All right, so Army coordination, and this is what I was just talking about next. So we have already talked to the majority of these commands and told them when we're going to be where. We've asked for their feedback. They have had input on the assessment of the cities in general. And so now the information filters down and we can start working together on actually planning the events for next year. Next slide. Message development. Next slide. So I'm sure you've all seen CPA sends. So a lot of our message development, it comes off CPA sends, it's inspired by CPA sends, but we generalize it a little bit more. We have these overarching messages. We don't need to go direct to them with multi-domain battle. So we go a little more overarching, but we also want to coordinate with National Guard. We want to coordinate with USAREC. What are the messages that they need to get out to their local community? You know, especially National Guard, who's been doing a lot of work in California or Texas with the hurricanes, or Puerto Rico. There's a lot of messages that they want to get out to their state about the hard work that they've been doing, and that really helps to bring it home for the people in that state to really show why the Army matters to them on a very local level. The other thing that we want to do is we want to keep track of current events. So we've had a lot happening this year with transgender, with North Korea. And so we want to keep track of those messages because you never know who's going to ask what question, and we want to make sure that our general officer is prepared to at least give the Army blanket statement and then refer them to whoever would be a subject matter expert, or to get more information for them from whoever would be a subject matter expert. Next slide. All right, now we identify the messenger. Next slide. So this is just a concept. The messenger. One of the things that we're hoping is by sending out the schedule through CPA sends, and we're already starting to see this a little bit, is that people come back to us and say, hey, you know what, I think I have a general who would be really great for this. And we say, fantastic, and we pencil them in. And the CPA will be sending this out to the general officers with the hope that they'll also come back and say, hey, I went to school here, or I grew up here, or I have family here, or whatever it is. And they come back and say, you know, I'd really like to support this. So that will really help us when it comes to planning, because we want people to go to these places who want to be there, who want to tell the Army story there. And the more enthusiastic they are about it and the more they want to be there, the better that trust and confidence will be built and the better those engagements will be. If we don't get that, we do our research on who would be the best general to go based on that same criteria, and then we'll make a pitch to them and ask them if they would like to go to the city, and then we will plan the event around them. So one thing that we do that's a little bit different than I think the way a lot of the Army does things is that we do not plan the events in the city before we have a commitment from a general officer. So a lot of times when we reach out, people want the itineraries and we don't have one. And that's specifically because we have found that some of these cities really will go above and beyond to try to accommodate that general. They will plan mixers, they will reach out to businesses and get everybody together, and they'll pay for food or bring in coffee or whatever it is, but they're very excited to host the general officer that's coming in. And the last thing that we want is for them to put in all that effort and then for us to come back and say, oh, sorry, we couldn't find anyone to go. That's not building the relationship that we want to build. We understand that things happen. I mean, people have had emergency situations and then couldn't go, and that's a completely separate story, obviously. Next slide. And now we do our trip book. Next slide. So we take everything that we have talked about. So the city playbook, we have now gone through and we start calling people, we start putting together the itinerary. We do the logistics. So what do you need to know about parking? What do you need to know about where you're going? We will draw up maps for you if you want a map. We have all your POCs in there, all the phone numbers in there, any agendas, if this is going to be something where you do maybe a little bit more Comrel, maybe you do a whole itinerary and then you go to a baseball game and you throw out a first pitch and then you go meet with leadership. We'll have that whole agenda in there, who your escort will be, how you'll get from place to place, the media plan with the messaging that will be in there. We also go through and we look at social media in the local area, not only for the organizations that you will be meeting with, but also for the city as a whole. So that way, if anybody wants to use their social media, they don't have to look it up on who to tag. We already have it in there. You just need to put it in. Yes?
I have probably a stupid question. So I'm at Fort Leavenworth, and we're already in a lot of Commonwealth stuff in Kansas City. So do we partner with you at an existing event we already do, or do we lead you toward one we don't already do, or say a corporation that we don't sponsor yet? I mean, how does that work?
So, and this is where it's a little bit gray. So we have taken a lot of the planning back for the Meet Your Army mission. However, the Army is unique in the fact that they have general officers that travel all over the country all the time. And I do think that there is a way to incorporate this into the Meet Your Army program. That's something that we're still kind of working through, because the one thing I don't want us to be, and a direction I kind of felt like we were heading before, was that we were kind of just keeping track of who was going to these different areas and just kind of checking it off.
And that, I heard the stigma was you guys come in and steal our event from us.
Right, and I don't want to do that. That is the last thing that I want to do, is come in and steal your event from you. Or be the program that just kind of piggybacks off of people. Someone's taking a trip and they're like, oh, here's Meet Your Army trying to add more work for us. It's not who we want to be. So if you're already doing Comrel, I mean, that's what you do as part of Fort Leavenworth. We don't need to be a part of that. If you would like to work with us, I mean, when we come to Kansas City, we would want to work with you.
But I mean, I would like to be able to maybe have you guys do something we don't already know. You might have a better in than we do it, let's say, with Sprint or one of the other large corporations.
No, exactly.
People that have been asking us, well, we can only support so many, we can only send so many 06s and above to,
yep. And all of this, so all of our schedule will be coming out in CPA sends, and we want all of that feedback. And we want to, before we start calling around and cold calling and trying to build the itinerary, we reach out to the CASA's reserve ambassadors, we reach out to you and just say, hey, where do you think we should go? Again, where do you need to build that relationship? Where should we not go because you've gone there 15 times?
Because from my little perspective, if you can fill a gap that I can't, then they're going to come to you and say, well, why couldn't Fort Leavenworth do this?
See, and my response to that would be that, we're working with Fort Leavenworth. It's not that we're doing something that Fort Leavenworth can't do. We're just supporting. Yeah. And the other thing that we do is that once everything is done, we send our thank you notes out to the organization that we've met with. Thank you for your time, for hosting us and all of that. We also provide them all of the local Army contacts within their region and say, if you want to reach out with the Army, if you want to partner with the Army, if you have any additional questions, here are your local contacts to go to, again, to help you build that local relationship that you may not already have. Because we don't want them coming to us. We can't maintain those relationships. All right, next slide. Next slide. Okay, so after all of that, we go to Sacramento. Hopefully everything goes off great. The general officer has his trip book. After that, we do a storyboard. So the storyboard has a place for leadership AAR. We want to know what the leader thought about their trip, whether it was great, whether it was horrible, what we could have done better. And we provide all of that up to the CPA. Next slide. So when it comes to, so we have our strategic, our trip book, our strategic messaging, and our public affairs portal. So our public affairs portal is going to be updated. But what we are going to be putting on that is you will have our storyboards, you will have our itineraries, stories that might be pertinent will be up there. Contact information will be up there for our city playbooks. And what we really want is, if you guys are going out somewhere that maybe isn't one of our priority cities, but somewhere that we have been to before, please go to the portal and see who we've visited. Take the opportunity to re-engage them if you have time. It's really up to you whether or not that's something you want to do, but that's a way to help the Meet Your Army program. And then, of course, we have our one-on-one engagements, interviews, and group meetings. And so this is really how we get our trust and confidence and meet our mission. Yes, we have media engagements that we try to get into as well, but it's the one-on-one meetings, it's being able to talk to people face-to-face, have them be able to ask their questions. That's really where we get the biggest bang for our buck. Next slide. Okay, so our evaluation portion, next slide. So we do print and online media, social media, and television. Our team goes through, we calculate up all the numbers, and then we also include our in-person meetings as well, how many people we met with. And while that number may not be high, when you look at community relations, they're talking to stadiums of people, but I think that our one-on-ones are a lot more quality engagement because you're interfacing with that person personally. Our social media, we don't have social media as Meet Your Army. We don't have our own Facebook page or our own Twitter. Right now, we just don't have the content to be able to continue to maintain it. So we rely on other people to use their social media, whether it be the general officer, whether it be National Guard or Reserve or USAREC or whoever it is, to use their social media to promote within that local community, which is really where that story needs to be told anyway. After that, we calculate up how many posts were posted, and then the amount of followers that they have as potential views of the post. Next slide. So, measures of effectiveness. This is something that we are still working on. Obviously, we want to excite and inspire. We want to increase the demand signal. We want more advocacy, but these are not easy things to measure. And even if you did measure them, some of them you don't completely know that it was you who did it. It could be a great media story. It could be that USAREC is doing an amazing job. It could be that the National Guard has a great community outreach. So right now at OCPA, we're working on different ways that we can measure our effectiveness. So one of the things is increasing demand signal. If somebody that we meet with comes back to either us or a local contact that we gave out and says, you know what, we have this thing going on, we would really love to get some Army people there. We'd really like a color guard. Or they reach back out to the band and say, hey, it was great to have you guys here. We'd really love for you to come play for our state lighting ceremony or whatever it is. We consider that a measure of effectiveness because they came back based on our visit and said, we want more. Now, that ensuing event would not be a Meet Your Army event. It would be a Meet Your Army effect. Next slide. Awesome. Okay, so now how can you help? So again, we've taken back a lot of the planning. There are those gray areas where, if you have somebody who is traveling to one of our priority cities and you would like to do Meet Your Army, or you're wondering if your event would qualify as Meet Your Army, please reach out to us because we want to know. If you're going to a city that maybe we went to last year or this year, go out and re-engage. I mean, we would love to see how that goes as well. If you go out and you re-engage with some of the people that we had already met with, reinforce Army, see if they have any more questions, let them know that, their Army is still thinking about them. We would love to know about that as well, and we want to provide you all of those resources. Now, not every event is necessarily going to qualify as Meet Your Army, and that's something that we've really been trying to draw our lines around, because Meet Your Army is not just ComRel. So we have to draw our lines about what qualifies as Meet Your Army. And you might have a wonderful event, or you might be going out doing great things, but that doesn't mean it's Meet Your Army. A couple of the things that we find that don't always qualify is a general officer who's going out and just doing their job. We found, like, I use TSG as an example, but she goes out and she's at a conference with a lot of medical executives. That's wonderful, but that's TSG being TSG. So we're not necessarily going to qualify that as a Meet Your Army event. Other things are you go out and you talk to or do an ROTC commissioning, which is wonderful, but they are pretty much internal Army. That's us talking to ourselves. They've bought in already. So that doesn't necessarily qualify as Meet Your Army. However, an ROTC commissioning as part of a broader event, broader meetings, could be enveloped into a Meet Your Army event. Same thing with throwing a first pitch at a baseball game. That in itself would not be Meet Your Army, that would be ComRel. Just like a band performance is ComRel. However, as part of a broader itinerary, it can be enveloped into the Meet Your Army event. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay, great. Next slide. So great ways to also help out is educate your senior leaders about what this is, because we need the general officers to go and to bring that Army story. I would also say that I would love to expand this beyond just general officers. We're working with the band to try and see if they have a band concert and we're working with them in that city, do they have a couple people that they could let go of for the day, and we can plan some music clinics at the high school. Maybe we can plan a lunchtime performance in the summer in the city center if they do something like that. Easy things to just get out there a little bit more. And we understand that not everybody has the bandwidth in order to do that kind of planning, especially when you look at maybe the Corps of Engineers or, again, National Guard Reserve. That's what we're here for. We're here to plan it. We just need the people in order to do it. We'll send them to the Boys and Girls Club and to the YMCA to hang out with the kids, because those kids go home and they talk to their parents about how cool the soldiers are. And what fun things they did and all of that. So, if we come to your city, like when we go to Kansas City, if there's people to spare that want to go out into the community and do fun stuff as part of that Meet Your Army day that we're there, we would love to plan that. We just need the people.
Question.
Yeah.
You said you'd like to expand it, but I hear general officer, general officer, general officer. What about the senior enlisted leaders?
Absolutely. So right now we are focused a lot on general officers, but yes, senior enlisted are great as well. So we've actually sent our command sergeant major out to do events just himself. And that's actually a very good point. He has done some amazing events just as a command sergeant major. So I will say rank appropriate. How's that? So while we are working with sergeant or general officers a lot, I will say rank appropriate. And if you send a general officer and a sergeant major, or a sergeant major and a captain, or something like that, and you want to pair them up, we can do 2 different schedules. It doesn't have to be both of them going to meet with CEOs and senior executives. That captain going to a high school to tell his story could be really cool. It's more relatable to the kids that are there than someone with stars on their collar. Yes?
Are you guys tapping into relationships with Soldier for Life or SFL TAP?
Yes.
Because they do a lot already also.
Yep. And Soldier for Life is another really good one where we also try to provide the information at the end as well, because we do get companies coming back to us and being like, well, I want to hire more veterans, but how do I do it? And that's where we try to tap them into Soldier for Life and say, talk to these guys. These guys.
Our biggest thing is once we show off TAP, they go, how do I participate?
Exactly. And that's where those local Army contacts come in. So we have our basic Army contacts that we give, the ones I've probably repeated 10 times by now. But if there's more, especially on a local level, we want to make sure that they're included as well. Next slide. Then there's hometown stories. So I don't know how many people still know this, but DMA still has a joint hometown news program. However, the difference between DMA and us when it comes to hometown news stories is we actually track them. We track whether or not they were published, we track where they were published, we track the impressions that come off of that, and we add that into our whole as impressions of reaching out to local communities. So we want hometown soldier stories. We want features about soldiers, and unfortunately, DINFOS doesn't teach our soldiers to include hometowns anymore. It doesn't have to be just from the 13 or 14 cities that we're going to next year. We definitely want them from the 14 cities because what we want to do is we want to send them before the visit or we want to send them after the visit, but we just want to keep that drumbeat going, that drumbeat that's talking about the Army. We'll send them to any hometown because these cities that we're talking about are going to change. We are not going to go back to these cities in 2019 because we don't want to oversaturate. Once they've talked to us, they're not looking to talk to us again necessarily the next year. So we will wait at least a year before we go back to these cities. But the hometown news stories is a way that we can continue to get into that town, we continue to talk about the Army, and when it's someone that grew up there, when it's someone that they could potentially know, that makes a huge impact because again, as we know in marketing, people like to hear things from people they know. That's who they trust, and that's a way that we're doing this. So any soldier features for hometowns, just send them on over. We will put them out to the media, we will track them, and we will capture that information. Next slide. All right, so I think I've covered just about everything. Are there any questions? We went through this very quickly. Yes?
Yeah, a couple things. Frank Childers with Army Reserve. So make sure that you're working with us. We have a lot of general officers who have a lot of hometowns and places that the big Army might not have the opportunities. And then we have Army Reserve ambassadors, and we need to find ways to get them involved. And then as a testimonial, we sent one of our general officers to Toledo, and it was a very successful, good engagement up there because he was able to plug into things, and it was a great itinerary. We actually got in with the Toledo Mud Hens, we met the mayor. So what y'all are doing is value added, so just keep it up.
Really appreciate it. And we are reaching out to Vonda and Dana Kelly and making sure that they're in the loop on everything that we're doing so that they can filter it down.
Funding.
That's a great question. We don't have any.
Yeah, either. So we straight out, we've pushed really hard over the last year to meet our objectives. We just went and did it on the Blossom, Blue, some internal, some external think tanks. But trying to get your bosses, or as I'm trying to do with all our subordinate commands, saying, hey, when you go out there to go do something in, I'll use my typical term, Oshkosh, there's other things to do up there besides just your meeting. But trying to get them to do that and say, hey, I can't stay an extra day, or so on and so forth, because of funding, or for, hey, I can get back for a meeting. What's the convincing factor that you guys are selling at the Army level, and how can you get other senior leaders to reinforce your program? Because they'll listen to us all day and go, yeah, got it, thanks, but if somebody tells them to do it and says, hey, you should go out there and get this done, that's, I think, one thing that needs to happen at the senior leader level is,
I agree.
You know, we got gentlemen say, hey, you go out there and talk to the media more now, okay, but how do you get them out there to talk about your social media, or your,
Soldiers? Yeah. So, and that's been a challenge. That's one reason why we're having this put out by the CPA before we go incredibly wide with it. We want the CPA to be the first one addressing the GOs and saying, hey, this is our program and we need to do it. The other thing that we're going to be including in that is the quote from General Milley. General Milley has come out in a couple interviews now and said, we're not doing a good enough job telling our stories. It is up to us in uniform to go out and tell people about the Army, to communicate that story, to build those relationships. And so we're using those interviews because unfortunately we haven't been able to get General Milley to actually send Meet Your Army stuff out. But we are using those quotes to at least show people that the CSA is on board. You know, and he's the one saying that we need to get out and do this, and we are a program that's going to help you do that and directly support the CSA.
And the other piece is, I know we're getting this here to take it back to arguments and stuff, but about a year and a half ago, you guys sent a draft exporter out on this.
Yes.
Not a program record anymore, but are you guys planning on putting out an updated, here's how you do this, here's what's available, so we can provide that to pulling the data, say, here's how it's done. We talk it a lot in trade out, but we just can't get people to execute it because they don't understand it. And then it gets out of fun.
Well, and I'll say this, so when it comes to any event that you're going to do that has the name Meet Your Army on it, it needs to come through us first to be able to approve the fact that it is a Meet Your Army event. Because what we don't want is we don't want people running with the brand and then just pasting it on any sort of community relations that they do. Not saying that that's what they're doing. I'm just saying that is something we want to make sure that we're keeping control of that brand and that it is standing for what we want it to stand for. Yes, we are sending out more information. The toolkit has kind of expired at this point because we are changing things. So we will be getting more information out. As far as the XORD goes, the XORD is still in progress. So we've done our first informal staffing of the XORD. Unfortunately, the GO that was heading that up left after the first informal staffing. So we're waiting for the new GO to come on board and all of that, and then we will. Yeah. Well, and again, the big thing that we need are hometown stories, education, and to let us know, if you want to be a part of the program in the priority cities. Because one thing that we're very focused on is the priority cities. Because we do not do all of this research to figure out where we should go to, tack on just random cities. That defeats the whole purpose of us doing an assessment. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so because you guys are coming out in March to Sacramento, so on this hometown release, because we're USAREX is kind of a different animal than, do you want me to go ahead and check for recruiters then that are from Sacramento or maybe attended UC Davis and then write the story and submit it to you guys then?
Yeah, that would be great. I mean, you would write it just like any feature for Army.mil. And you can submit it straight to Army.mil if you want to and just give it to us as well. And we'll make sure that we push it out to the hometowns. So I don't know if you were worried that being a recruiter would be a problem. It's not a problem.
No, it's just a different monster. And, we're more marketing focused.
Yeah.
I'm public affairs too, so.
Yeah, I mean, just a feature on that soldier's story, how they came to be where they are, that kind of stuff. Very simple.
Yeah, I like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so again, we're not trying to sell anything. We're just trying to inspire.
Right.
Educate and inspire and inform. Yeah.
I think one of the other pieces that's important here is what's the follow-up? I mean, so we're not out there doing, random acts of touching. Who else is coming in? Is there a plan for that? And I think some of the units out there, be it recruiting command, be it the guard, be it the reserves, be it others that can help with that. I don't know if you can talk about that at all.
Well, one thing we want to do is after we go and we're well coordinated with the Army assets on the ground is that we want to do a follow-up with them probably a couple months later and just say, how did this help you? Has it helped you? Has anybody reached back out to you? So that we can get an accurate assessment of how things are going. And then again, with follow-ups with people coming into the city after we've done the Meet Your Army event to maybe re-engage people that we've talked to or maybe reach out to new people that we weren't able to get to. We want to keep track of. Does that kind of talk to what you were talking about?
John Morgan, Portland, she's coming out to Portland.
Yep, we are. Actually, can you throw up the schedule?
Yeah.
I want to know about being tied to a particular event. There's no really particular event. So is the Meet Your Army the event? And how well will you're doing all the planning as far as who you're going to talk to or what you're speaking to within the community, the media. So because my S2 is going to want to get right into this and start picking out and saying, hey, here's where we want to go. Here's our priority. Here's our propensity. He's going to think strictly about recruiting and not necessarily engagement and education piece.
Right. Well, and that's all feedback that we want, especially if it's relationships that you need to build. But then, yes, we will take that and we will couple it with what we need to do to meet our Meet Your Army mission.
Okay. So you're doing 90% of the planning with little input, and then there's IPRs along the way. Right?
Yes. Yes. And while I say that, we do the majority of the planning, I say that in respect to the fact that we don't want to come in and say, hey, can you plan this for us since you're here? We're not trying to
Get down the road, I think we can be the hook for you for some reasons.
Exactly.
Events can be your hook
And
versus the GO being the hook.
And we have definitely had reserve ambassadors and CASAs who were well networked within the community actually plan basically the entire itinerary for us just because they were well integrated into the community, and they plan it based on the guidelines that we give them. Again, that's not a request that we ask that people plan for us, because that is what we're here for. We're here to plan it. But if somebody is incredibly excited and wants to take those reins, we are happy to work with them on that. It's helpful to us. We have a very small team.
I'll talk to you after this about the one particular, the Rose Parade. I'm afraid it's going to be overwhelmed. The Meet Your Army might be overwhelmed by the Rose Parade itself. It is, yeah.
Well, and that's why we have May 25th to June 9th. We'll only be there for a day.
Okay.
So we need to talk about what day is best for that.
The day before Fleet Week starts.
Perfect. Perfect. That's the kind of information we want to know. We just figured at that point there would be a lot of people that we could at least talk to. But yeah, we don't want to get.
And would you be involved in trying to coordinate, let's say, a part to get CEOs like Nike's headquarters there? We can't get in the door because I talked to them stuff. Adidas headquarters there, we can't even make any inroads. Of course, we don't have a general officer.
And that's where, especially in places like that where you don't have a general officer, a lot of times if you can come in and say, hey, I've got this 2-star with the Army who would love to meet with the CEO, sometimes it becomes a different story. Sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, we would definitely want to help you try to reach those CEOs. Sir, I think you had a question?
Yes, ma'am. Major Carter, Cadet Command. For hometown releases or the hometown stories for cadets, is that something that we could send you as well?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Future soldiers.
Future soldiers, absolutely. Yeah, all of it. Sounds great.
So like for the first line, how are you reaching out to some of the major military commands? Like that's our backyard. So how do we find out where you're in the area, or if you need support from us or the NGO? Or
We do our best to reach out to everybody who's in the area just to let them know that we are in your backyard. And again, we want to help you build those relationships in the local community to tell the Army story. So we do our best to do that. When this comes out via CPA sends to the entire PA community, anybody is obviously also welcome to reach out and say, hey, this is my backyard, what can we do? And then we keep record of that. Is that helpful?
yeah, it's just because that's the first we're seeing of this. So what are you planning on sending this out?
Within the next few weeks, probably.
To the CPA sends yet?
No, so no, this has not gone out to CPA sends yet. So this has been approved by the CPA. And as you can see, some of these are still windows. We're waiting to get the air show schedules for the Black Daggers and for the Golden Knights, because what we want to do is we want to reinforce Army as much as possible. So if they have something going on close to or in one of these cities, we would rather go when they're about to have an air show and then say, hey, our Golden Knights are going to be performing, you should go check out the air show, or you should go check out the band concert tonight, or something like that, so again, we can reinforce Army.
So are you bringing like the Army band now down, or are you going to use the trade-off band? Or?
So what I have here is where the Army band is scheduled to perform. I don't have other band performance schedules. I would love to coordinate with other bands, we just haven't gotten that far yet. But if, again, when we work with the local assets, we want to get the biggest bang for our buck. So if you have a color guard, if you have soldiers, if you have a band, if you want to get them some exposure, we will plan that. Is there another question over here? Yes, sir.
Master Sergeant Jeremy Bunkley, 1st Armored Division. You spoke about brand and Meet Your Army brand. So just for instance, social media, we have a lot of campaigns, whether it be YX or Wednesday or something where we tie a soldier to their local hometown, try and tag that hometown, and are more and more using the hashtag Meet Your Army.
Yep.
How do you see that as falling in line with what you all are doing? And should we continue to do stuff like that in that aspect, with that Meet Your Army hashtag?
Right. So the social media, because we don't have our own social media. As far as the guidelines for the hashtag is something that we're still working on, because we want to make sure that events that are being publicized as Meet Your Army fall within the Meet Your Army guidelines. However, if you're just talking about soldiers, if you're talking about their hometowns, if you're telling the soldier story, no matter where you are, that is Meet Your Army. You know, you're meeting your soldiers, you're telling that soldier story. So I think it gets a little gray and a little wishy-washy. I think we just want to stay away from publicizing Meet Your Army in coordination with events as opposed to in coordination with people. Unless it is a Meet Your Army event. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Great. And there was one more question back here. Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am. You mentioned there's no funding associated with this, and the county is responsible for paying the bill. Is Meet Your Army sufficient to justify the TDY?
Yes.
Did the attorneys say, or do you need an anchor event?
No. No. We have run it through the attorneys. This is considered an official Army event when you go out and you meet. So no, legally it is sound. We do tell people that they should run this through their own attorneys if they're worried. Our attorneys have said it's good. So GOs should also run it through their own attorneys, those commands. One thing, and this will be my final comment, if you want to talk after, great, but the Secretary of the Army is speaking next and I don't want anybody to get held up. I do want to expand this program. I think that having general officers, senior enlisted leaders go out and meet with people is great. But if we really want to make a splash in these cities and we want to build that trust and confidence, we need to be doing more than this. So my hope is that over the next few years or so, if we can gain some funding as we continue with our coordination, I would love to eventually, hopefully, fingers crossed, build this into more of an Army week, where we're all working together in a city. And I think we need to do that if we want to be competitive with the other services. You have Air Force Week, you have Marine Week, you have Navy Week, you have them going all over the country, taking assets in and hitting multiple levels of the community for an entire week, getting into the media, having bands do bump in and bump outs on morning shows, things like that. That's where we need to get if we actually want to start being really effective. So these are the baby steps that we're taking to get there. Funding is one of our main issues. But I'm hoping that the more we coordinate, the more that we can show people, hey, see how great we did when we had the band and we had some soldiers and we had a general officer and we all came together and we did this for a day and how well received it was. We can start showing them that we need to expand this and we all need to be getting together to work on this for longer periods of time to really make the difference that we want to make. So that is Meet Your Army, everyone. Don't be late for the Secretary of the Army.